They ran up to
What company?
she
They'll be back.
Michelle.
Yeah.
Oh.
Amen. She got it. Or is that okay on the baby?
Oh, is it okay to put the hand on the
Yes, yeah, she'll.
Should we wait? They're on their way, they're walking. Okay. Okay, let's get started.
Show us for us to.
Welcome back, everyone. Good morning.
New stranger. Yes. She joined us.
So, today we're gonna be talking about now diseases, so actual conditions of Vata, and looking at what there isn't much more to describe about the pathology or the changes, because that's kind of what we went over very, very detailed yesterday. Okay, so now we're going to look at what happens when Vata gets aggravated and gets lodged in particular places of the body, and how that starts to manifest as disease. Now, the reason why that we're going to find these conditions and how they have determined where it wants to be located or where it's going to manifest, we're going to look at that, and then what's the appropriate way to treat it. So you may find that, we go through the diseases much faster than we did the last time. It's because the pathology is what we went through in great detail yesterday. Okay. So before we get into the topic, anyone want to share how they feel after yesterday's treatment? And I want you to share this because what I want you to look and see what you can expect after you do Lukshana therapy. Because just remember, keep in mind that the purpose of yesterday's treatment was to induce dryness. Okay? Both methods that we tried yesterday was to induce dryness, to absorb up the moisture so that it would start moving again. So keeping that in mind, I would like anyone who wants to share how they feel after yesterday's therapy.
I've been working today than yesterday, but no, before you get. But I talked to Alicia about it, and it's shifting, so it's coming up my neck now, it's over. It's all on the one side, it's interesting, I have a headache on one side of my head, it's so odd, but yeah, there's a lot more pain going on. Definitely shifted in quality too, like, it feels more expansive, which I think is a lot of what we're trying to do. So it's changed.
Is it as deep or when it expanded, did it lighten up?
No, it's intensified. It's still as deep, but now it feels like it's spread. So if I didn't know, like I came in, I had a little dismayed. I was like, it hurts more. And she's like, that's good. I'm like, really? I don't know if I'm down with this. Like, I woke up at 3 a.m. Oh God, what did I do? Like, what did they do? But now talking to her, I was like, oh, okay, this is a good thing. And it's not a stuck, and now it's moving, change, shift away.
Anyone else?
Well, mine doesn't hurt at all anymore. But, so I just, when you asked, I felt that good because Carrie asked me this morning when we were walking, she said, oh, how's your shoulder? I said, oh, I didn't even think about it. Yeah, nothing, it doesn't hurt at all. But the knot is still there, but there's no pain. So, yeah, I don't know what that means. Okay.
It's interesting because before the treatment, the part of what makes my elbows hurt was this action, just pressing the palms together. And that is so much less. I mean, it's almost negligible. And it's kind of like, I don't want to do it because I don't want to make it come back, but it's just like, no, it's not just something that's there. So, something should.
Okay.
So I had the one on my back, and it was interesting throughout the treatment. I don't feel anything. It's cool, not hot. It's not really interesting. It's just odd. Then once it came toward the end, I started to feel a little icy hot feeling, and then at the end, it was a big pile. And at the end, once it came off, the whole area tingled almost like prickling, and then it isolated to this small spot. And I can still feel like if I focus on the spot, I can feel an odd warmth in that one spot. And if I can feel where the mass was still, like very subtly, like I have to be paying attention. And this morning when I woke up, maybe bring it out, everything like in the lower back and the hip as I got out of bed kind of went, and then it just, I cracked, but not like that. Happy. Very happy. Still very nice and warm there. Yeah.
And then, I just have the spot here, and I was in a little bit of a sharpness when I pressed, and now it feels more just like a boom. That's the best way to describe it. It's still a little tweaky, but I can move it, and so it's like, okay, come now. So that's great. Yeah. It aches. Yeah. Like my range of motion is a little bit today. But I can't say that's different, That it changes quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'd say like the main thing is like the whole area.
Okay. Right?
I was great, and that rain came in last night, and I got a little fogged up.
That kind of messed it up a bit.
It feels like, the whole summer. Swampy. Our toilet paper, like, it's, boy.
That's the quality.
I mean,
Yeah.
when I go home, I know to get that big hug.
Then it's probably-
Like, yeah, we're destroying the whole world.
I don't think she called on me.
something I have to say. Oh, he's getting upset.
Do we have a bucket of water we can throw on it? Right. So the difference between the sand and the rasnadi. First with the sand, it is completely drying. The property of sand is that it is ruksha. Okay? So the factor of what's happening with the sand, the reason why we're applying it is to try and get rid of that block. And notice that when the difference between how I chose who to give the sand to as opposed to who to give the rasnadi to was the fact that I wanted to see if there was a lump. If you can actually feel a lump or feel the accumulation there, that means that it is more to the external and it is something that we can help to break up. Now, the sand is not there for any other purpose other than drying out that accumulation, okay? So the reason why you will feel pain after that is because you have gotten rid of the other factor and now it's purely vata. And that's what we're trying to do. That's the purpose of doing the ruksha before you do the sneha. So you don't just do ruksha alone. And when you do this, now this is the thing, if you want to do this for a client, you have to have them set it up as a package. That is 1 day of ruksha and the second day or the third day with the sneha. If you don't do that, they're going to come to you and you do ruksha alone and it's going to be painful, like, oh, that person sucked. It was horrible. I did this, they did this thing to me and I feel worse. And that's because it's not a complete treatment. This is a stage of the treatment. And the reason why I wanted to show you that yesterday, because that is what we do first in this condition. Then what after that, then we follow it up with sneha. Because once you get rid of this block, then all you have left is vata alone. And then what you would typically do here would follow after the drying therapy. Okay, so it is expected that you're going to have this shift or this movement or the pain. That is good. That means that now vata isn't stuck over there, that it's now moving. So once vata gets moving, remember vata's natural quality is to move. But now what happened is once we have dislodged it, you're actually feeling how much of vata was stuck in that small little place. Okay? So when it expands and it gets a chance to move, then you start to feel it. So you will get more pain. Because when vata starts to move more, or it is more in quantity, what happens? It is painful. That's the reason why on all vata vyadis, there is pain. That's kind of one of the cardinal symptoms. Vata equals pain. Okay, you can't get any kind of pain. Any sort of pain. Even if you get a burning sensation or a pricking pain or a moving pain, even the pain, the perception of pain, what we talked about yesterday, is through vata, is through the mind. We're looking at the functions of both vata and the mind. This is the reason we went through all those details. Because now we're going to be nitpicking at those details. And why it is that when we do these therapies, how it is effective. Okay? So when we are getting vata moving, you will have the pain. But now that it's vata alone, it is easier for us to manage. So now what you should do is apply oil. And what of oil you apply is any one of these. There's no other oil. Where did the light go?
Something.
Oh, maybe.
Something by your over there.
No, that's not. Okay, well, what you could apply after that is you can apply either the liniment, or that's a good pain reliever, which you should probably apply some right now. And Kate, you can too. Or otherwise, the more generalized it is, the more it's moving about the whole body, that's when you can do even a simple thing as abhyanga. But abhyanga with a medicated oil, not abhyanga with just sesame oil. Because if you're doing abhyanga with sesame oil, it is not strong enough to handle that quantity of vata. Okay? So you can you need to use a medicated oil that is specific to pacifying vata. So if it is on the whole body, remember I told you Dhanvantara is good for generalized vata, dhyana vata, moving all over the body. Dhanvantara is great for that. So that's what I did this morning. I applied Dhanvantara. I did Abhyanga with Dhanvantara Daila this morning because of all the excessive vata I've been doing for the past 2 days now, talking. So at the end of it, doing that this morning, now I feel okay. I don't feel like the butt is rinsing. I don't feel that twitching sensation.
Did you thin that down because it's kind of thick?
No,
Okay.
I used it as it is. Because the minute I put it on, it almost feels like a warm blanket. It almost feels like a warm blanket. And in that sense also, you need something thicker for vata. Because when something is moving around, you ever notice like if somebody's moving or twitching or anything, what do? You hold them, you give them like a big hug. That is kind of like the purpose of the pidana, or the squeezing, or the compressing. In vata, you need to do a generalized compression. And when you do that, that helps to slow it down. So the reason why vata oils are thicker than the other oils is because it helps to slow down the vata. And this is also the reason why when we're using oils for any kind of medicated oil for vata, we use sesame oil as a base as opposed to coconut oil, is because sesame oil is more viscous. It is thicker in comparison to coconut oil. Also the Vivya as well. Sesame oil is more hot, coconut oil is more cold. So there's a concept behind. Anybody else have any pain? Go right ahead, feel free. So this is the reason why in each and every one of the ingredients that they've chosen to make these oils, it has a specific purpose. They are all aimed at pacifying vata. Okay, they're all aimed at calming down vata, and not just the movement part of vata, but the pain aspect of vata, and also the rate of vata, as well as maintaining the functions of vata. So now you see why, again, we looked at all of that stuff because now we're going to see what our intervention is really aiming at. Okay? So you don't need 1,000,001 things to pacify vata. You just need one good thing that would help to calm you down. Okay?
So, Anusha, so that I understand, the sand is used when you feel a lump and you know that that's kind of blocked and swelling is there. The paste is used when there's no lump and it's just
Usually, so thank you for asking that. So the sand is used when there's a lump and you don't necessarily feel the pain. When there is a lump with not so much pain. Pain, I would say like a little bit of pain. This one, no lump and more pain. The reason why the difference between this one and this one is this is only drying. That's the only property of the sand. It's not medicated, it's sand for drying. That's the reason why we're using it. This one has a different property. This one, the properties of the Rasnadi is that it's Ushna. It is also Vedana Sthapana. And that means that it is, Vedana means pain, and Sthapana means it stops or it relieves. Okay? Yes. So these are the main actions. There are also more other actions of pacifying vata. This works also on the nerves. Okay? So in multiple factors, the Rasnadi has a different effect than the sand. Okay? So when the person is experiencing more pain, that means if you're feeling more pain, that means the vata is kind of moving. So instead of it being a big block, it is just a partial block. Make sense now? Yeah. Okay. So this is the reason with the partial block, you don't necessarily need as much of the drying of just removing the block because Vata is already moving around. That's why they're feeling the pain. So here we can use a milder form of drying because if you look at it, our paste wasn't dry at all. It was wet. And usually what we want to do is we want to leave it on until it does dry out. Okay? Maybe in this very, very moist environment, it'll take much longer for it to dry out. But the purpose of it is, even though we wet it to apply it on, the heat from the body and the movement of Vata does help to dry it out, and it gets absorbed. So in the process of the absorption, in the process of adding in the lime juice, what it does is it opens up your pores. Another reason why you take lime internally or you apply it is it opens up your pores and it allows things to move out and in. That's how it helps to control your body temperature. Why we drink lemonade summertime.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could, and this might not be confirmed, but touch a little bit on the qualities of lime.
So lime is, of course, it's sour. It also is a very mild analgesic. Very, very mild. And that comes from the property of the lime, the oil, the citronella oil. That the oil is, but it's a very, very mild. I mean, it's not strong enough to use that alone for the kind of pain that you're expecting here. Yeah, but it does. It enhances the absorption. So if you want to say it in the definition of Anupana, here the Anupana is actually the lime juice because it enhances the absorption of the Rasnadi powder. Okay, so you can have Anupana even if you're not taking it internally. So Anupana, the purpose of an Anupana is to enhance the absorption of whatever it is you're mixing it with. Okay, so here the Anupana is actually the lime juice that enhances the properties, enhances the absorption of this Rasnadi powder so that you get here. And for those of you who are doing it, remember you said that you're starting to feel the heat now going in. So what it's doing is we've applied it over here. Say this is the skin, right? We applied this stuff over here. It needs then some time to get in. Okay? And the more time we leave it on, the further and the deeper it goes. Very similar to what you felt with the Pindaswedana as well. You know, afterwards you say, I can start to feel the heat inside. So that's the reason we need to give it some time. So let it go in as much as it can. So it has more contact with the Vata inside. Okay? So then it will have this reaction of the Rasnadi with the heating property and the analgesic property of the Dasna and all the other combinations of that, the herbs that are in that, they all help to then pacify the Vata. So the reason why some of you who put it on don't necessarily feel a complete effect is because remember I gave you the example of someone who has a recent onset of aggravated Vata. They would not be able to keep this very hot substance on for a long period of time. But for those of you who had it for a very long period of time, that again indicates how much of Vata you actually have. That even though you kept it on for almost an hour, you still don't feel an extreme amount of heat. So that in itself should show you how much Vata you actually have. I think all of us do have a little bit of, yes, go ahead. You have a question? Okay, never mind.
All right.
So it indicates how, and most of you who put this on said that, I've had this thing forever. I've had this for a couple of years. So again, that also indicates how chronic. Remember we were talking about this yesterday? Once you enter the stage of chronicity, no matter what it is, it enters a stage of Vata, right? So whatever the disease is, including diabetes, which isn't really necessarily a Vata condition. Even in diabetes, once you enter that chronic stage, it enters the stage of Vata. Vata will be there. So that's why you require more than just one sitting or more than just one application. Okay? You need something even stronger. For the purpose of demonstration, we did it once. Unfortunately, we don't have any more packets. But what we could do, if you have them, apply them on for at least 2 to 3 days. After the 3rd day, once you've still done a little bit of effect of the vata here, then you can start applying the oil. Now, a good thing, in case somebody doesn't have that block, there's another option of using rasna. If the person does not have a block, they have no signs and symptoms of any kapha or any ama related in their body, then you can go directly at this stage of applying oil. And here also, there's Rasnadi oil. Okay, so the same rasna, what we're using for this purpose here, in case there is any ama or any avarna, and the definition of avarna is anything that's blocking or hindering the movement of vata. That's the reason why we're using this paste as opposed to an oil. If there is no ama, there is nothing blocking the vata is moving freely and they're feeling pain, then we go directly to the oil. And even in the oil here, if it is vata with pain, you can use the same rasnadi. Instead of a powder, use it as the oil. Okay?
So the use of the sand doesn't necessarily feel hungry. So the accumulation of congestion, edema, pain, or swelling in the joint is not associated with heat. What else?
We can use the sand for, let's see here, I have my udvatana. We can use it for conditions like cellulitis, congestion, the edema in the knee or your ankles, frozen shoulder, mostly for those conditions. We don't use it as often. Actually, we do. I've seen it being used even for a condition of hypothyroidism, because that is a kapha-related condition. So and this was my mom's case, where not necessarily, it wasn't localized. It was in the whole body. Because what that does is that affects the kleda, or the moisture. It starts to accumulate in the whole body. So this sand poultice isn't just for one localized treatment. It can also be done in the whole body. And what you've probably seen in Kerala is they usually do. They do it for the whole body. It's only in certain conditions that they localize it. Okay? So for the purpose of demonstration yesterday, we kept it to a small spot. But ideally, what we would like to do, if we were to really be aggressive, you can do it in the whole body and dry everything out. And what you can expect is that will cause severe pain. Not just a little bit of pain, it will cause severe pain. But what happens the next day is then you're conditioning the body to then absorb as much oil as possible when you start applying the vata pacifying oil. So for my mom, what they did was first they conditioned her body by removing all the moisture or the kleda that she had, or she still does. She has hypothyroidism. So they did the sand poultice for her for 3 days. After that, then they gave, instead of giving her, they gave her the oil application and Swedana. They used more of a neutral or a kapha pacifying oil, then more vata, because she naturally has more kapha in her body. So they didn't necessarily need to use a vata oil there, okay, in that condition. And then after that, they gave her basti, because they wanted to make sure that any of the excessive movement of vata also gets pacified, and also any lack of nutrition that she has that they can. Now, there are 1,000,001 types of basti. Basti can be done from multiple methods. But for her, it was for the purpose also of pacifying kapha as well as pacifying kapha, because they did do this dry therapy. So depending on what the situation is, you can use that. Or if you want, you can use also the Udvartana or the dry powder massage. They both have the same effect. The dry powder massage can also be used in other conditions. And that where it requires more amount of rubbing and manipulation. So for instance, if it is a small lump, it's easier to get rid of it or to break it up with sand. If it is more dispersed and there's more amount of this kleda or moisture or blob dispersed around the body in a larger surface area, then you need something more than just the sand. So in that condition, you can instead opt for Udvartana, where they would use the dry powder. And in that's a vigorous massage. So you're actually really breaking it up. Anybody ever had Udvartana done? How did you feel after that?
Beat up.
Yeah. And what if you have a lot of kapha, it helps when it starts to break up and it goes away. If you have vata, you don't like it. Right. Why? Because the vata moves more. It dries it out and the vata moves more. And then you end up feeling more pain and more discomfort. So for you, it was ideal. For you, not ideal. But the reason for you, why they would do it for you is to condition you for the next. That's ideally how it should be done.
My friend was in the KSA work school, and she was one practice at home. And I'm like,
But it's not indicated for you at all.
Oh, so you got the American version.
I got the American version.
Yeah.
I was irritated. Not
Yeah.
in pain, but just irritated.
And in a Vartana, sometimes again you have to choose because Pitta people don't tend to really like it. Vata people also will not like it because it aggravates their Vata. Pitta people don't like it because they don't like the irritation on their skin. Yeah, my mom didn't like it. She didn't like it, but she liked how she felt afterwards. She didn't like when they were doing the poses. She did feel like they were beating her, and she kept calling me and complaining, "They're beating me. I don't like it." So just calm down. Just let them do what they're doing. You need to relax. And, and then, yeah, but I knew what they were doing. I trusted them. She went to a very good place. It wasn't fancy. It was in no way fancy at all. But she got authentic, very, very good quality treatment because for her medicines, they made it fresh every single day. It was a research center, a government research center. So her oils, everything was made there. Her kashaya was made fresh every single day. So there was no preservatives, no additives, no any concentration, exactly as how they describe in the text how you should do it. She got that kind of treatment. So within 3 weeks, she was good. Then she came back here and her feet came back again. But for that 3 weeks and for the 2 months following that, she was back to normal. There was no issues. She was off her meds. She didn't tell her doctors. She was off her meds. And she's a bit of a complicated case, but we managed all of it.
So in a very wet climate or in springtime, would the sand be a good treatment to transition through season?
Yes, it helps. It helps. Now, one thing to do is remember, just like sand, we are conditioning the body to absorb more moisture.
Right.
So that's what happened with you yesterday. That we did this wonderful treatment of getting rid of some of your blob, and then it started raining. And then you absorbed a bit more of that moisture. So that's why it just came back again. Because the sand conditions you. And the thing is, you have to intervene as to what goes in first. So if it's wet outside, it'll take that in. If you put oil on, then it'll take that in. So you're basically making your body a sponge. So
But would you rather have that oil in than your own?
then the outside moisture, yes. But even in that, you have to be careful. That's why typically, even when you do the body therapies, they give you these conditions of when you should not do it. So you don't want to do Abhyanga actually in things like this. You don't want to do these therapies when it's moist like this or when it's cloudy outside. This is what they mean, is because it affects the way your body will respond to treatment. So yes, that becomes it's very difficult for us because we can't tell our clients, oh, well, it's rainy today, so come back tomorrow. You know, like, no, I made an appointment 2 months ago. I'm gonna be here, and you better be ready, you know? But in that, you have to adjust your expectations as to what you can expect, how they're going to feel, and also warn them. I didn't warn you yesterday that you're probably gonna have a thing.
I trusted you, so I wasn't.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you.
I was a little like, oh, she's got some to do.
I also railed on after quite a bit, so I would really anticipate a massive movement of fluid and stuff, tissue that broke up. The scar tissue was boggy, and so overnight we get more boggy and all flushing. So I'm going to guess that tomorrow we'll probably have more of an opening. Maybe dull, but you'll get the sensation more.
Yes, because it will start to move out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I would anticipate that. Now, Michelle, she's a whole lot drier. Her knot wasn't the palpation remotely as boggy as yours was. That which moisture was there, which I find interesting because of how hers responded so much differently to.
Yeah, because yours wasn't as much. It was a slight, a very mild knot. But what happened, the reason why it doesn't bother you as much is the Rasa had the best option to really give you that analgesic effect. So if you were to apply this again today, if you apply this the second day, you'll be all set. Or even if you don't want to apply this, if you apply the Shalafi, then it would really help to relieve quite a bit of that. So that probably won't necessarily be coming back. Only if you get trigger factors that feed into that again, then it will resurface. Because what we've done here is just superficial. We have attacked it from here, but we haven't done anything on the inside, right? So which means we've gotten rid of this block, but doesn't mean that it can't create a block somewhere else. So it's still sitting there waiting. So maybe it'll go away from here, but it may come back here if there's some reason for it to.
You also say that if there is an entrenched habituated postural pattern, that it may come back anyway. You don't need to
Yes,
kind of deal with it on that level.
yes, but what,
Everybody gives some kind of movement.
yes. So that's why you will get rid of some part of it, but we're not, again, treating the actual cause. This is actually a symptomatic treatment. So what we're doing is just getting rid of the place where it manifested. What we then need to do is do the internal stuff, where we start to push the excess vata out. And that's why in our handout we have Sneha, Sweda, then after that we have Shodhana. And more than for pacification of vata, more than for taking medicines that will suppress vata or pacify vata, instead of that, they first indicated Shodhana. Because one of the best ways to calm vata down is to get it to come out of the body. All of the other two doshas don't come out of the body, but vata is the one that does. That's part of its normal function, isn't it? Vata's normal function is it does come out of the body, right? So in that, one of the best ways to manage vata is to get it to come out of the body. So how do we get it to come out? We either do Virechana, which does exactly that, get the vata to come out in its appropriate direction, or do Basti, which does the exact same thing, gets the vata to come out in the appropriate direction. The difference between Virechana and Basti is that Virechana can help to move just vata down and out. But Basti does a double function. It gets vata to move out downwards, plus it can also help to pacify vata in the nourishing factor. Because when you do Basti, we usually add in oil, right? So we can use Basti to do both functions. One function of cleaning out the shrotas and getting vata out, plus we can get it to do this as well, to replace the nourishment. So that is the reason why Basti is preferred. Enema is preferred for vata. Of course, this is our limitation here. This is our problem, that we are limited, that we can't do Basti. So if we can't do Basti, we can do the best possible Virechana. And the best possible Virechana to do is Virechana with Sneha. Okay? So same like in the Basti, we would be administering it this way, and it is with oil or with Sneha, and that's how it attacks Vata in its place and gets it moving out. Plus, it also gets partially absorbed faster here so that you can get the Sneha part of it. So it addresses Vata in 2 levels. If we have to give it internally from here and cause Virechana, then it is not as good as Basti, but it can be close enough to that. Is give a Virechana that is with a Sneha. So we can have somewhat of a mimicking effect. So can anyone think of what a Virechana with a oil? Thank you. Yes. That is why castor oil is considered the best method or the best substance for giving Virechana in Vata conditions. And it, yep.
So, given the scope of practice issue and that, we're educators, you wouldn't educate somebody into a Basti and let them go home with castor oil.
No, castor oil you don't use for an enema. Castor oil you use for Virechana. Castor oil we won't because it's too hot and
Well,
Well,
bubbly.
the same
that-
question, can't we instruct a client how to do Basti at home and let them do it at home?
You can, but it doesn't go with the way a Basti should be done. A Basti has a very, very specific manner of how it should be done. In the sense that when it is administered, the person needs to be lying down. They cannot be doing any other action other than lying down and counting. So that when they count, that helps to open up their anal sphincter so that it allows the medicine or the dravya, whatever liquid, to go inside there. Now, if you're telling them to stand up and insert an enema, not going to work. It will not produce the same effect. If you're asking them to do the drip enema, it doesn't go in with the particular force that it should. There is, in Basti, it is a quite a, and I know this again is very contradictory to what a lot of people say, but this is not my opinion. This is how it is taught in the classical text. Charaka Samhita has a whole volume. The 6th volume is completely on how to do Basti and what all happens if you do not do Basti properly. There is about 8 chapters on what all can go wrong and how to treat it. So Basti isn't something that you can have the person do at home. It isn't. It is something that does need to be done by a clinician who knows what they're doing. That's why I really feel that is beyond our scope of practice. So it's better if you're better off asking them to do a Virechana that is classified for Basti, classified for Vata, than getting them to do an enema at home that is probably not going to be done right and end up with problems. They will be more benefited by just taking castor oil and doing that Virechana than doing the Basti and having problems with that. So better to stick with what is safe and what is possible and is more beneficial for your client than trying to do the ideal thing but is not appropriate, because it's not, the client has no idea how to do this. You can train them on how to do a Basti, but it's not something that they can do by themselves. Even for us to be trained on how to do a Basti properly takes time. You need to know what pressure you need to insert that enema nozzle into the anus. You need to, after doing the enema, after inserting the dravya, it has to be massaged in. So the person is lying down on their left lateral side. This is how they lie down. So they lie down on the left lateral side, and their left leg is flexed and the other one is kept straight. And the clinician has to insert the Basti yantra into the anus. You have to have the person count, because in that helps to relax the anal sphincters, and then it allows the liquid to go in easier. In the type of Basti that you're doing, there are 2 types of Bastis too. There is the Kashaya Basti, or the decoction Basti, and then there's the purely oil Basti. So depending on either one, there is a certain amount of pressure at which we have to insert it. So just as the person is counting, in that same manner and same pressure, we also insert the Basti Dravya. That's how much pressure we put in. What the yantra, the instrument we use to administer the Basti, even that also has to have a specific shape, it has a specific size, so that we make sure that it's going in at the same rate. For an oil Basti, it's different. An oil Basti has to be done after the person. A decoction Basti has to be done on an empty stomach. So there are a lot of specifics that go into it. If the person doesn't know all these things, and considering our society, they're not going to follow it. It's like, oh, well, I think I have some 10 minutes right now. Let me do this and I'll run out the door. It won't work. You're going to end up with a lot more complications from your good intentions of trying to do Basti than if you're better off just giving them the castor oil, where you can control the conditions a little bit more. So that's why we can't necessarily do Basti, but we can get the closest best thing, the next best thing, which would be a Sneha Virechana. Okay? And the Sneha Virechana, the best material or base material for that is castor oil. Because castor oil pacifies Vata. Because if you look at, again, we were talking about viscosity of oil, it's much more viscous than other types of oil. It's very ground. Also, it's very hot in potency. So because of the hot potency factor of the castor oil, it induces Virechana. It induces purgation because of the hot potency. So it is actually an ideal method of giving Virechana for a Vata condition.
You know what the shelf life of castor oil is? One of it goes on forever. Sure.
No, for the most part, it does. And it has to be kept in a really dry place. As long as it's not exposed to too much of moisture, it keeps for quite a while. Because it's not like the flaxseed or the flax oil or.
I mean, a couple of years.
Yeah, I would say you have to check and see. Check up on it and see if it's turning or if there's any exudate or any changing in color or cloudy changes in it. But I think for the most part, it's like about a year to 2 years, depending on where you are and the climate and where you store it. But it can go up to around 2 years. If you're medicating it too, because usually we don't just use castor oil alone. We can medicate the castor oil with, again, these same herbs. And so you have a list of herbs. What, did I put a list of herbs in here? List. I think there should be a list. Yes. So they do have, these herbs are used for medicating the castor oil. So there is medicated castor oil that you can get. Or you can make your own medicated castor oil. You guys have done some medicated oils before. So you can medicate your castor oil and you can have them with that. Okay? And if they don't do that, that's also fine. You can still use plain old castor oil to give the Virechana and have them take other Vata pacifying herbs. And what I found that is in Vata conditions, so here even in the treatment of Vata conditions, it's better when it's done internally to use it in some form of liquid as opposed to a powder or a pill. Anyone can guess why? Why? Exactly, because it is too dry. And we try to do the drying from the outside. Remember yesterday we were saying we don't want to try to dry it out too much from the inside, okay? Because the body does need a certain amount of moisture, even if it is the excessive amount of moisture. The powders don't necessarily react in the best way for Vata. It's better to use it in a moist form or in a liquid form internally.
When we use triple up for a Vata condition, we boil it, we let it sit all day long, and then they drink it.
Yes, this is the reason why you do infusions or you make kashayas. This is where you want to make a kashaya. Because Vata will respond much better to a kashaya than it would respond to a powder of the same herbs. okay? So this is where you want to make those. So, and if you can't make it and you still have one quick and easy way, very, very easy to make decoctions. You get the powders, you tell them to make it like a tea. A lot of people are very now, they're very good with making teas and they're okay with doing that process. It's not hard. I was even thinking like have them make it like little tea bags, dump it in their water, let it boil, and after when they come back, same like you make the boiled water. Now boiled water is not a hard thing to do. Same thing. You put the tea bag in your water. You go brush your teeth. Go get ready. You come back. Your decoction is ready. And you take that half of it in the morning. You keep the rest. You don't have to reheat it. Take the rest. There you go. You have fresh made kashaya ready to go. Right? So this is the method. This is the general concept of what we do for vata conditions. This is the reason why we do swayed rukshana first and then sleep. And in which conditions the ruksha works better, which one of the ruksha therapies work better, and then after that, you start with the sneha that most of you already know. You've already been exposed to the typical vata pacifying sneha. Okay? And not just the vata pacifying sneha of using plain oil, but now you can start doing the medicated. Okay? And like I said, there are many, many, many vata pacifying medicated oils. I've just picked out a few because these ones are available. But there are many more. There is no restriction, and this is not the only bunch. If you start doing research, you're going to start coming across a lot more of the oils that are out there. Okay? Like for instance, there's Rasna Saptika, there's Rasnadi, there's Rasna Erandadi, there's Kshira Bala, there's Bala Kakuri, there's a whole bunch, I think somewhere around 600 different kinds of oils that you can use according to the different permutations of if it's Vata and Kapha, if it's Vata and Pitta, if it is very chronic Vata, if it is a specific condition like a diabetic neuropathy, or if it's that. According to that, there are so many different kinds. But in general, these are the ones that I feel that you can use right now. And when you get comfortable with this, then you can start exploring some more. And if you want to, you can absolutely explore. No restriction. But this is just a suggestion. Yeah.
Size of those bottles, and you would probably use a bottle on the person. That, I mean, they come in larger quantities than.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
Ideally, when the thing is, in the U.S., you usually get them at smaller bottles. The one, where's this? Where am I? Oh, I'm disappearing. So that would be 21 for us. Okay, I don't know. The Sahacharadi one, which is the bigger one, that's kind of the basic size that you get. And then they have, I think that's 250 ml. And you get a larger size that is somewhere around 450 ml. That's the bigger bottle. That's the biggest bottle you can get. So that's also available. Typically, depending on what we're using the oil for, you may need either, if you're doing like, for instance, a pouring of oil, then you need like 2.5 bottles for one person. If you're doing just like a Kati Basti or just one of the wells, then maybe half a bottle to maximum bottle, depending on the surface area. Okay, and those same busties, luckily I've already learned this, so I haven't put it in there. But these busties can be done according to where the vata is stuck or where it is located. So this is a therapy that you've already done. You've already looked at how you have to know the technique. And what you use the oil for, the oils that you use are these oils, because that is a very advanced vata aggravated condition. It will not respond as quickly with a regular vata pacifying oil. So like a plain sesame oil, it will not necessarily respond. It takes more time to respond. But the person will respond much better to Sahacharadi if they have the lower back, because that acts specifically in that area. And it acts specifically for Are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh.
How would those oils compare like a lost oil
That's a good question because some of them, I think they're processing, and I think we need to do maybe a little bit more research to see exactly how they're processing the oils. But like I said, one of the criteria to know that the oil is really medicated the appropriate way, what the medicated oil is, it is an extraction. It is a very ancient method or a cruder method of extraction of the components from the base material, from the base herbs. So it should take on the color and the smell of those herbs. That's why you notice that these oils that we use are not mild in any way. They have very specific odors. And the odors are from the herbs and the combination of herbs that we've added to it. If you notice, now I'm not ragging on any company, I'm just telling you what as it is that if you notice some of the other oils, they don't have that smell. They don't have that color. Almost all the oils are a standard color. So it makes me question as to what process they're using to make this. Even in the medicated oils that we make in Ayurveda, like the ones with milk or the ones without milk, there's a specific manner in how we make it. And I think all of you have done this in PSA, right? You all did make medicated oils. Did everyone get a chance to make? How many of you got a chance to make an oil? Okay, so there's like half of you. So half of you didn't get a chance to make a medicated oil. Okay. So typically, this is good because for those of you who haven't made a medicated oil, you need to know this is kind of like a quality control. How do you figure out if your oil is good? The ingredients that go into making a medicated oil, you have the base oil, which is either sesame or it's coconut. Okay? You have the herbs. And in the herbs, it can be done one as a decoction and one as a paste. Okay? And then you have, so this can act as the liquid. Sometimes this becomes the liquid as the decoction or, okay? These are the three major components of what's there in making a medicated oil. So we have the base oil, we have the herbs. They usually, in the formulas, they give you a list of herbs. And in that list of herbs, they tell you which one needs to be made as a paste and which ones you need to first make a decoction and then use that as a paste. Okay? So you use a group of herbs. And the reason why they have that is because this is an aqueous extract of the components from the herbs. This one, when you add the paste to this process, you're doing an extract here with oil. So that is a fatty extract or a.
I think like ashwagandha has to be heated and the only way properties extract is through that on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's one.
Yes. Thank you.
That's
Fat
what I
soluble. That's what I.
thought.
Yes. Exactly. So this is water soluble extract, and this is a fat soluble. That's the word I was looking for. So that's how you have a specific group of herbs. Sometimes this decoction acts as the liquid that you then add all together. And sometimes that is one part of it, and they also can add milk. Okay? So the Kshita Bala, for instance, this is a good example. In the Kshita Bala, you have the sesame as the base oil. You have the Kshita, the Bala, first they make into a decoction, and that is added into the total input. And they also have the paste of Bala that is added in. So what you do at the end, you have a pot, first add in your base oil, you add in your paste, and then you add in your liquid. So when they're making this, first they make the decoction of Bala, and then they make a paste of Bala. So they collect all these ingredients, then they add in the sesame oil, the paste of Bala, and the decoction of Bala plus milk. This has two liquids. And that's how they cook it until. How do we know that we've cooked it enough? We cook it until the paste at the bottom is completely cooked. So ideally what we want to do is we want to cook off all the liquid portion until we get a pure fat, right? So how do we know that all the liquid portion is gone? We collect a little bit of the paste, roll it up in our hands, and put it out or put it on top of an open fire. And if there is any liquid content left, it splatters. And if there's no liquid content left, it doesn't splatter. So that's what determines how long it needs to be cooked.
You say you're making a paste, what does that mean?
So you take either the fresh herbs and make a paste, or you take the dried herbs and you grind it with a little bit of water until it becomes a paste.
Okay, so it's that.
Yes. And it could be, in this situation, it's one herb, or it could be multiple herbs. And in each one of the formulas, the reason why I was telling you, how do you know if it's a real oil, is that it has the reference. The reference, like for instance, in the Sahajirani, they give you the reference of which textbook they got it from. So it tells you exactly where this formula came from. These aren't proprietary medicines. It's not something somebody made up, but it is something that is from the classical text, from that chapter, with the indication this is used for Vata Roga. Like for instance in this, they haven't given us the reference of the chapter, but they do say that it is indicated for Vata Roga. So here we know that this is actually a classical formula from the chapter of Vata Vyadhi. So that's how they made this, according to the classical text.
So it doesn't have a reference, it should concentrate.
This is in India. In India, I don't know what the standards are for here, but in India, for the Ayurvedic pharmacies, by law, this is our method of getting licensing. So in these formulas, you'll see here at the top somewhere, they have the license number.
If they don't have that reference, then potentially poetic license.
They have the license number, and they have to print it on. In order for a pharmacy to be approved, first of all, they have to get approval for every single formula. It's not just the pharmacy as a whole gets approved. Every formula that you make needs to have a separate licensing number, which means it has gone through the Department of Ayush. They have gone through and checked what your protocol is, how you're making it, what are your equipment, are you doing with is it a classical one or is it a proprietary one? Have you devised this formula or is this something that's there from the text? Okay, this is a proprietary one. This is something that this company came up with. They came up with a really good formula, but this is something they made with using the concepts of Ayurveda. This is a classical. So according to that, even then, this also has a manufacturer number. This also has been approved. This has a manufacturer number. This also has been approved. Okay? So in any of that, even if it doesn't have a classical reference, look for the manufacturer number. And that you can actually trace back.
So, knowing that you kind of done research in this area of herbs and things, and the United States media would have you believe that, Indian pharmacology is just so adulterated, it's, horrible. I don't know how much of that is just they deliberately want to scare us away, they want to sell us more pharmaceutical conspiracy theory. I don't know. But what I'm getting at is, what's your opinion kind of across the board? How much adulteration is there?
There are some that are adulterated. And I wouldn't kid you, not all Ayurvedic pharmacies are the best quality. So there are, even with us who we know that have licensing number, we still look for certain pharmacies that we know, we trust, that are more authentic than others. And even in those, just like the question you asked, Kate, that even in the Ayurvedic, in India, the Ayurvedic pharmacies, even in their oils, you can find a difference in quality and smell and taste. All of the organoleptic characteristics are different from pharmacy to pharmacy. So some pharmacies are fairly standard and it's around the same. So you collect 5 samples of Chirabala from these pharmacies, they're all around the same thing. And you find some pharmacies, you get a sample of Chirabala from their pharmacy and it's slightly different. It doesn't have the same color, it doesn't have the same taste, all their oils look the same. Then that's what you need to know. You need to find out if it is a reliable oil.
So this visited Rick Scalzo's diet herbs in North Carolina. And I mean, it's so slick and modern and clean, whatever. When I was at Jiva, they showed us a film of their herb operation. It was like, you know, pretty cruppy, dirty, so, yeah. Everything was good, all the herbs were mixed with dirt. Piled up outside the building.
Those ones actually come out the best oils. Yeah, because that's traditionally how it's done. You know, it's not to say they don't wash them and they don't clean them up beforehand. But yes, we don't need fancy equipment to make oils. We don't need all stainless steel everything to make these medicines. We did it long before in clay pots. We've been making these for 5,000 years in clay pots. So we don't need that. The original traditional pharmacies don't have those things. So that's just for show. But it's not necessary to make quality Ayurvedic medicine. Most of the quality ones, you still have the hand-rolled pills. What are you going to say about that? Oh, that you have your germs, why aren't you wearing gloves and all of that stuff? But originally, even some of these pharmacies, now they've updated to have pest pills and stuff. But when I first started, it was all hand-rolled pills. And we were also taught to make hand-rolled pills. So we make the paste, we mix in all the ingredients, and then we roll it and we make hand-rolled pills. That's why the original gulikas were round, completely round. They were not pressed with a nice uniform little shape and package.
What did you hold them with? Paper or a husk or something? But the paste and rolled up?
No, in our hands,
Oh, okay, so paste rolled.
We made a
that was
paste,
the-
yeah.
Okay.
And the paste, and we rolled them, and we kept them to dry in the shade. You get the hand rolled. Okay, so back to our topic. So this is kind of the concept of what we're looking at in general of the treatments for the Vata. Okay. So what I want to start with now, hopefully, I think this is kind of settled in everyone's mind, the concept of treatment and how we treat them. And now we're going to look at specifically Alzheimer's. Start off with the big one and look at, so this one, it does have a manifestation of both the body and mind. And when we look at Alzheimer's disease as such doesn't have a very specific name in Ayurvedic classical texts. Okay? It can be considered as a condition. And the reason why it isn't specifically named as a disease or a separate disease is because it manifests both in Vata conditions as well as manobhikramsha, or an issue with a mental disorder or a psychological disorder. Okay? So in Alzheimer's, it affects both. And remember, we were looking at the overlap. There are notes for
Not
this.
in your notes.
No, there are no notes for this. So you just have to listen and write your own notes. I did not give you notes. Thank you. Yes. Listen and write. Everyone's like, what are So in Alzheimer's disease, again, remember we were looking at the overlap between Vata and the mind and some of the functions you find that they're psychological functions, but they're also functions you find in specific types of Vata, right? So that is actually the part that's getting affected in Alzheimer's. Remember we looked at the Udana Vata and the Vyana Vata have these mental functions. Udana Vata is the one that is responsible for the Dhi, Dhriti, and Smriti, right? So in Dhi, Dhriti, and Smriti, what do you think is being affected in Alzheimer's? Exactly. It is Smriti. And if you look at the specific symptoms, it's not just Smriti alone. It's not just Smriti alone. It is also Dhriti. It is the ability to process information. Because certain things you're telling them and they don't understand. They previously were able to understand, but now they're not able to understand. So it's actually all the factors here. We ideally think the cardinal sign and symptom of Alzheimer's, the basic onset of the disease starts at the memory or starts with the Smriti. But in this condition, it affects all of these levels. It affects the memory, the ability to process information, also their patience, and also their intellect, their ability to retain knowledge. Okay? So this condition works both in the body and the mind. It is a psychosomatic disorder because this change or pathology here can start with the body and have the effect on the mind. Okay? You can also have the factors that are simultaneously affecting the mind. Okay? So it all comes in together. So going back to our timeline that we had looked at in our slide, we have our timeline, we have our factors. We have the factors that are influencing the aggravation of Vata, and we also have the factors that are influencing the changes in the mind. That is, changing this. And what are those factors? Rajas and Tamas. Okay? So yesterday we looked at what are the factors that affect Rajas and Tamas. How do we know that Rajas and Tamas is coming about? Or, what are the qualities associated with that? So you'll notice that people who have Alzheimer's or who are in the onset of this previously had that particular type of lifestyle. So you see the causative factor and the progress now and how it ends up as Alzheimer's. But the cause of where it began started with all Vata aggravating signs and symptoms, which we've already looked at, and also factors of more Rajas and Tamas. So that's basically the cause and the pathogenesis of how it starts to affect. And it manifests in their mind. And it's really a psychosomatic disorder because it doesn't only affect their mental capability and their mental processing of information, but it also starts to, the more chronic it becomes then a physical issue. You start to get physical signs and symptoms. And those physical signs and symptoms, again, are nothing but Vata conditions. Now we can go back to our checklist and say, oh, yes, they have an issue with the memory, blah, blah, blah. And then they're also, they're constipated, or they're not able to sleep, or they're agitated, or they have all of these other typical Vata signs. So this is the reason this hasn't been described separately as a theme. But it does fall under, again, Vata conditions and also an aggravation of the doshas of the mind. Okay? So that's the way we approach Alzheimer's. Okay? So you can partially term, very loosely, you can term Alzheimer's as Smriti Vibhamsha. And yesterday we talked about Smriti Vibhamsha when you're not able to recollect the things that are memorable. Your memories, the way memory works is it's able to recognize or to recollect the things that are memorable as opposed to things that are not memorable. Okay? So in this, it's even the things that should be memorable, like for instance, specific dates and times and things that you should know, or how to drive to the grocery store, or what's your wife's birthday or your birthday. These are things that are supposed to be memorable, right? Even those things they can't remember. So that is one of the first signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's. It is Smriti Vibhamsha. Okay? How does that occur? That starts usually with, again, the same issue here. Okay? It can happen in both aspects of Dhatu Kshaya and as well as blocking of the Shrotas. Vibhamsha. Vibhamsha means an abnormality or a block. Yes.
Sorry.
That is kind of the term you can use for Alzheimer's. But as we can see, it's not just Smriti alone. It is also the Vritti and also so all aspects of that's affecting the mind. Vibramsha means perversion. Vibramsha means perversion. Okay. So if you were to take, now it's not always the case in each and every person, it manifests the same way. But if you were to take a history of someone who has Alzheimer's, and of course you can't ask them, you have to ask their family members. They won't remember. Okay, so you have to ask their family members what's happening. You're going to notice that they would have had all the signs and symptoms of Vata aggravation. And either it starts as a purely Vata condition with that then develops into depletion and Dhatu Kshaya, or you may find that it could be also that they have Ama that has developed into aggravating of Vata, and then that has developed into then these changes. So Alzheimer's isn't a condition that comes on all of a sudden. It is something that slowly progresses to the point where it manifests in the mind. You start to see the change. But just as all of the other Vata Vyadhis that we've talked about, stays latent. So this is the reason why you tend to see an onset of Alzheimer's in elderly, in the older years or the later years. Because you have all of the factors that feed into the manifestation. It gets more of the Roga Bala. Okay? The Roga Bala is basically Vata and the Rajas and Tamas. So it keeps building and building and building, and it keeps progressing, and it has all the factors keep feeding into it until when you get to the later years, you're naturally in a condition where there is Dhatu Kshaya. The natural disposition or the change in your body happens where you tend to have more Vata, tend to naturally have more depletion. You tend to naturally, your mind slows down, right? And so that's why it starts to manifest. And if that's the case, so the question may come, why doesn't everybody get Alzheimer's? Right. The reason why everybody doesn't get Alzheimer's is if you keep that mental activity that we were talking about, right? Yesterday we went on this big tangent about mental activity and psychology and how it reflects with the body and how to keep the mind healthy and going. This is the reason why it doesn't manifest in everyone, is because those people who keep that mental activity going, it keeps this functioning very well. That mental activity and that process keeps this functioning very well. Also, you notice, this doesn't manifest in everyone. The people who have this functioning very well are those who have more of a sattvika nature. More of a sattvika nature, or sattva. In the process of learning, remember what we described, how do you increase the strength of the mind? And how do you know if the mind is still working well? Is by doing these activities which enhance your memory, which require you to process information, like the coloring, like the concentration, like studying scriptures, like singing. All of these activities that require mental activity doesn't allow. So you think, okay, well, that means more of Vata. Not necessarily. The mind is also just like Vata, it has to move. But if it moves in the appropriate way and in the appropriate direction, it is good for you. If it moves in the inappropriate way or in the diverted way, then it becomes a problem. So the same thing what we talked about in Vata, how Vata needs to move, the same way we talked about how the mind needs to move. Yeah?
So, using that example and understanding why it happens in older age, it's when somebody has early onset Alzheimer's, and I'm going to say this into later years as well. If a person, and I'm going to use an example, had trauma happen in their life, a lot of father, lost a child, and that stays with them, builds and builds in their later years, even if they're mentally active, and that trauma come in, and the same thing with early onset body there, and the trauma just explodes.
Yes, because there it's not just Vata. The reason why when we're talking about the factors that affect or that's affected in here. It's not just the body or just Vata alone. It's also the mind. And remember, the mind has very similar functions as Vata, but the mind has separate qualities, and the qualities of Rajas and Tamas are there. So even though the person seems very active and they seem that they're doing all these things, but if they have more of this Rajas or Tamas that is predominant, and typically trauma comes in here, then that can be the trigger factor for this too. Yeah, because grief is Tamas. So if they have that, then that also becomes, remember, we're looking at trigger factors. All of this happens latently. It's all sitting there. This is the reason why there isn't specific Purva Rupas for these conditions. Because the Purva Rupas are just mild versions of when the action starts to manifest. And it can, there are conditions where if the causative factor is so strong, it skips over the Purva Rupa stage and goes directly to acute manifestation. And if you look at that, even that, it doesn't just come up just all of a sudden. That becomes the trigger factor, but you can trace it. So for instance, if somebody doesn't have Alzheimer's, right? You don't have somebody who has Alzheimer's, you get clients way before. Hopefully you're getting them before. If you're getting Alzheimer's, clients, great. But the reason we're talking about this is, even if you're not coming across it, you're going to get a lot of clients who you would be able to pick out and start seeing if they're heading in that direction. And most likely, there are a lot of people who will be heading in that direction. This is the reason why Alzheimer's is so predominant in our society. Because if you look at our lifestyle and if you look at our society, it is extremely Vata predominant. It is Vata promoting. Keep pushing Vata as much as you possibly can. Keep moving. Keep on your schedule. Keep doing this. Don't wait. Don't take any time to rest. You have to go from one thing to the next to the next. Keep building pressure and stress. Always you need to be thinking. Always mental activity. Always either going from here to the point where you revert back in here. But maximum, I'm assuming more on the side of observation, but a maximum of our society has this type of mind. And have this type of mind plus the Vata aggravating lifestyle. So they are all heading in that direction. So they may have a mild version of Alzheimer's or they may have a very severe version of Alzheimer's. But a lot of our elderly are now, or maybe by the time the millennials get there, we can expect a lot more occurrence or prevalence of this condition. So we have these good tools to figure out how we can help prevent the onset of Alzheimer's. And not just prevent, but if we do get the people who have already manifested with Alzheimer's, then we can also help to pacify the condition. Once it manifests, once Alzheimer's manifests and they have this serious condition of memory loss and processing information, then the more chronic that is, or the more severe the symptoms, it crosses over to a condition that is not curable but manageable. Okay, so Alzheimer's as such, and as for the Ayurvedic perspective, the more severe the symptoms, it's not then in a curable state. Remember we talked about Sadhya Sadhyata, and which is what classifies as something that we can cure, or something that we can cure with difficulty, or something that we can manage. So once it becomes chronic and there are more signs and symptoms of this Alzheimer's, it crosses over to that stage where we can just manage it, but not cure it. Okay, so even that becomes our limitation because there are too many factors. There are way too many factors that keep pushing. And the Roga Bala is so strong that we can't get enough. We can't get the Rogi Bala enough to get rid of it. Okay?
So based on what Terry was saying, someone who had a lot of trauma in their life, if you know that, or if we as a group know our own individual lives, the things we can do now to prevent that, would that just be the concentration and the things, what are the things we do? Just balance
There are 3 aspects in treatment of this condition. Yes, but thank you. You're processing. But yeah.
The Christian Charter would recommend PET-CT as the age recommendation for timing. And Alzheimer's is like really heavy in my family, so I'm watching it. And like I've had a personal theory that it's about circulation. So the antibodies that day. And like in my father, he doesn't have pulses here. And I sort of think, I intuit that the brain's not probably irritated by the process because circulation is up. So it's like, are we actually talking about a degenerative condition of the brain tissue?
Partially, yes. As you were saying that, that's exactly what I think you got.
Yeah.
Right. And you would know better than anyone. Do you feel like he's had a long-standing Vata imbalance? What has his lifestyle been like, and what sort of activities has he been doing?
He's a Russian, he's very confident, and he's actually made it like a decade longer than anyone else. Dementia,
Right.
Starting at 84, 88.
Right.
But yeah, he has sciatica, he broke his back, he's on his knee. Yeah. So it's like, I don't see it so much in Robinson Thomas, but I do see it. Yeah. But I do think because of Sasha, he made that every decade.
Right. Which factors are playing into the disease and which factors are playing into increasing his strength. So that's why even in these conditions, there's no set way to describe that it has to be Rajasthan Thomas or it has to be Vata or it has to be both. It depends. And I know this seems kind of like a free-for-all and it's not very structured. I understand that, and I know it can be a little bit frustrating. But keep these things in mind because it seems very general and sort of out there. But when you start seeing people who have these conditions, it's going to start jumping out at you. You're immediately going to start seeing, I think, this, the idea starts popping in your head. I wonder if this day, or you ask, that's when you ask the question, is there any family history of Alzheimer's? Or do you find it sometimes difficult to remember things, like you need to like leave little post-its for yourself, or you need to keep a diary or something like that? These ideas will start coming into your head because you start forming the idea now that I think this may be happening. This is what probably the changes that are occurring. And the thing about the Vata Vyadis, again, is what I keep repeating, is that the process is still the same. The process of all of these conditions are still the same. It just picks the place where it wants to manifest. So like you said, he has sciatica, he's losing weight. All of these are all Vata Vyadis. And they're all things that we're going, and it has the exact same manifestation. The same Nidana, same Samprapti, just a different place where it shows up.
Two things that come to mind when you were talking about trauma. I'm sorry, yeah, about trauma. You see dissociation often with that trauma, so they know effectively how to escape whatever's happening currently. And for some reason, I feel this correlation with Alzheimer's, and you said something like that about, what is proper memory? What is the memory we should be keeping? And so it kind of brings me to the second point of this really lovely place where I feel like I'm at, from Pitta to Vata, and how much we can do in that liminal space of that transition, or somebody who's had trauma in their lives, if they can maybe learn to not, the dissociation has been effective here, but then as they go into the Vata stage, and I don't know, I've never read anything about could dissociation then turn into something like this, so that this beautiful time period, because personally, just as a side note, I found this time to be challenging in the sense that I keep looking at, am I doing too much? Oh, you're doing too much. You need to. So I'm having this kind of hustle and sadness and all the things that go on with moving to less, but yet knowing less is better. But I think who are at that, you know, that point between. That feels like there's a lot that we, and we talked about this a few years back, that I noticed for me, because I had suffered trauma as a child, that puberty, childbirth, and menopause all were very challenging mental times for me when I hit the darkness. Not that I had a lot of menopausal symptoms, but it's like it was a resurgence of all the past traumas. So anybody in your cousin has hit, and then if you were at a trauma conference, something like that, there's got to be a connection. There are lots of transitions in life. If there was lots of turmoil or trauma, then it's all going to manifest again. And yes, that's why I had to literally pull back, because it's like, I don't want to go back on that. And that's when, you know, that's the thing. Like, that's when I was on medication. I don't want to go on medication. So what do I have to do? I can't be like the rest of everybody else and work. I have to take those measures.
And what you're describing, those events, those are all events when there is an extreme surgence of vata to carry out the event. Like, for instance, in puberty, it's vata needs to initiate or push the release of hormones, and then that creates an immediate change. Similarly, in childbirth, that is again an immediate rush of hormones, an immediate push, and immediate change. So vata has a very big part to play in those events. And similarly, again, with menopause, it's pushing, it's creating a very quick change. So vata will be predominant at that time, in those times. This is the same reason, if you look at the different therapies that you need to do to manage these times, and just swasthavita, keeping health. And those regimens, they're all vata pacifying regimens. After childbirth, it's completely vata pacifying. It's vata pacifying in both levels. You have to help to get rid of whatever is blocked in the process, and then renourish the body. After childbirth, even in puberty, why do you think we keep pushing all this milk and all these other things for kids? It's because it helps to pacify that condition. And same with menopause. Milk, again, another really great example, because it helps to pacify the pitta predominant condition, and it also helps to pacify that immediate rush of vata, because so many things are changing, so many things are moving, so many things are being mobile at that point. So that vata aggravates, and all the regimens to pacify or manage those situations are all, again, vata pacified. So this is a good thing that you brought up, because there were Vaidyas who said, someone once said that if you don't manage a woman postpartum, if you don't do a very good postpartum care, that woman is going to suffer for the rest of her life, because she's always going to be carrying around that vata with her. And that vata can manifest anywhere. So you ever notice that women who, for instance, again, very predominant in our culture, you see that women give birth, they get a few weeks off, and then they rush off to work. And it's not a slow progression into entering into work, it's immediate and fast and trying to catch up. And what happens? Within a few months or within a year, they start with the back pain, or they start with the migraines, or they start with the joint issues, or they end up with the constipation, or even hemorrhoids. They have all of these vata-related conditions. And depending, like you said, the body's flexibility or what sort of movement you're doing, you're habitual to. Similarly, what sort of vata condition you are habitual to, it will manifest over there, right? So that's how it starts to show up. So that's why women who are doing more exercises and who are bending more, they'll get the back pain. The others who are running more, they'll get the knee pain. The others who are lifting weights, they'll get the shoulder pain. The others who are trying to deal with a lot of stress and keeping emotions inside end up with the headaches. Okay, so this is where it finds the place where you're doing more or you're storing more of that vata, and that's where it matters. So these regimens that have been given, these very extensive regimens, are basically our ways for preventing any of these diseases from manifesting. But if we don't do that and we still keep going, it will manifest. And when it manifests, then we have to try to bring it back.
The charter is such an important.
Yes.
Simple techniques to cultivate love every day of your life.
That's not bad, because as you were saying, the person who does this gets knee pain. There's this huge spiritual, psychological, and emotional overlap when you have that pain and injury and trauma and things in your life. It is part of this bottom management. It's huge. And that's, I'm like, I don't know what the daily practices that's just around. And it's not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy. And it's, you know, it's sometimes we think of it, it's hard enough for us to keep up with daily practices. But now, when we look at these conditions as the result of not doing the daily practices, it can get this bad. So we get the milder versions of it, or maybe a little bit of joint pain, or a little bit of frozen shoulder, or sciatica, or it could even be as something as bad as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. They're all the same, one and the same condition, just more and more and more chronic. That's all.
Funny, just from my personal perspective, like Ishvara, the surrender, the letting go, the letting go, the letting go, the endless non-attachment, because I am not that. You know, I am not that. I am not that.
And this
I mean, it's big. I mean,
yeah. Yeah.
I understand that, but how is it like what's familiar?
You mean it's an origin? Oh, you mean like the hereditary issue?
Right.
Even in so there are certain conditions where it can be genetic, and even that's been described. That's considered as bija dosha, where so bija dosha is a problem with the bija, or a problem with the reproductive tissues of the parents. So that's what makes the person somewhat prone to having this condition. However, even in those situations, when a person is born even with a bija dosha condition, they still have the ability to prevent the onset of that. So, like Kate, you described, you have this family history of Alzheimer's. So you know that you are more prone to maybe vata-related conditions or vata psychological, vata and mindset conditions. So in that, your practice, what you do, and your constant maintenance of your health prevents you from getting any one of these sort of vata issues. So you have mild versions of vata issues, but you're not allowing it to progress so much further so that it can get to the more chronic states of vata, where it can become a more unmanageable. These ones are in the susadhya or the kricha sadhya. We're still, right now, you're still in the state where it's easily curable or curable with a little bit more amount of measures. But you haven't allowed it yet to get to that state. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but for the example's sake, if you weren't doing all the things that you do, and if you weren't doing all the practice that you do, it would be very easy to end up. So say a person like you, someone else who has a family history, if they are not doing all these things to manage vata, it would be very easy and very quickly for them to progress down to this very chronic state of vata and then onset of condition. So it could be, again, onset of a very severe state or a very severe condition, or it could be, again, starts off mild. But like you said, you can see all of these vata-related conditions, like first the gas and constipation, then the back pain, or the sciatica, or the wasting, or the malnutrition, or then the headaches, or even, depending on the person's prakriti, may even develop as a vata kapha condition or a vata pitta condition, and it could even end up as that. Okay? So that's what we're looking at in Alzheimer's. So the way we look at, there is a bigger theme, if you look at the sum property specifically of how it happens in the brain, or how it will manifest in the brain. It's a bigger theme there also of the Agni. Okay? Vikriti of the Agni at the Dhatu level and at the Bhuta level. It's obviously it starts again with the mild aggravation of Vata and the mild issues with the Agni, the Chaturagni, because that's the one that controls all the other Agnis. So sometimes there are certain situations like this one where you may get somewhat of a balancing of the Chaturagni. But the other and the Bhutagni, if this is low or this is Vishama, this will then eventually translate to the lowering or the imbalance of the Bhutagni and the Bhutagni, right? This we learned in the last one, the last module. Sometimes what happens is if you're doing Deepanapachana, you're doing some mild measures, or if this is the season, like for instance it's winter and you end up getting a little bit hungry, or you do some mild little measures, this can go back and seem normal. But the changes that have happened here, if we're not really looking at doing this consistently, this could have also been aggravated, right? So in order to make this consistent, you need to always keep making sure that your food and diet is always digestible. And it always keeps the maintenance of your Agni. If you maintain your Agni for just a little bit and you think, oh, I'm good now, I have a good digestion, I'm pooping good, so I think I'm all set. But you still find the striations in your nails, you still find a little bit of the drying skin, you still find a little bit of the cracks. And what are all those? Vata Vyadhi that we just looked at. All of those are indicators. The Vata Vyadhis that we talked about, the Vata Vikaras that we talked about, are not just conditions of Vata, but they're also somewhat indicators that Vata is aggravating. And it's sitting there and waiting and it's gaining strength. So this is the reason why we don't just figure out Vata, imbalance of Vata Pitta Kapha, but we also look for all these other signs and symptoms, right? Why do we go through this big, long, massive intake process? Because we want to figure out everything. And sometimes what happens is, if this is so irregular, this can become big. So in the Dhatva Agni, if the Dhatva Agni is irregular or low, it can start causing ama. I'm sorry, this is my very bad picture. There you go. Oh, there we go. Yes. So it can start causing ama or in these channels, very minute little channels. Okay. So this starts to then affect the flow of Vata, affect the flow of the mind. And that is one of the reasons why you're not able to then recollect the memories and also process the information. Remember when we were talking about ama, and in ama it said that when you have ama, you can't necessarily engage and you feel sort of disconnected and you can't process information. Now do you see why?
Are we going to call amyloid plaque brain health?
Yeah. Yeah. So in this condition, it is partially again due to the Agni, due to ama associated with Vata, and also the factors of the mind, Rajas and Tamas, all play into the manifestation of how it manifests over here, as opposed to manifesting somewhere else. Yeah.
But in that last time, I think you had said that there was no such thing per se as ama in the mind. So let me ask the question, if the ama is present in all of these other places and gives us this general constant quality, is it just that it's so overwhelming that you have to move? I'm just trying to wrap my head.
That's a great question, because remember, I didn't say that there's ama in the mind, but there can be ama in these bhavas and in these shrotas. And what this is describing is, remember, when the food goes in, and if in the Jatragni, in the stomach, if ama forms here, depending on how chronic this ama is, the ama itself can get pushed off. Remember that? So when there's ama that gets pushed off here, it's actually located at these levels. And when it gets located here, what do we mean by located? It's not that these dhadus are fixed places. They're moving in shrotas, right? So the ama, just like we saw in our lovely picture, ama starts to sit here. So it can be in one of the high, rasa or rakta, which is typically when you get ama that is dislodged over there. That's when you start to get disorders. Okay. And when it gets to the higher dhadus, then that's when you start to see that it starts to affect those areas as well. Okay. So in the tattva agni, when the tattva agni is lowered, you can get ama in these shrotas. So sometimes it's either ama sitting in that shrotas or ama that has dislodged and traveled there. Just like plaque. Plaque can dislodge and travel places and sit there. And what that does, again, it blocks the movement of vata. It blocks the movement of the mind. And what happens if you're blocking the movement of the mind? You can't have those same mental capabilities of cognition, of remembering, of processing information, because that needs to move freely in order for you to have that reaction or that function, right? So if it is not moving freely, then it starts to slow down that process. So that's why, this is the reason why, if we look at the treatment for Alzheimer's, here also, the treatment of Alzheimer's starts with Rukshana. Rukshana, I'll write it down. So, treatment for Alzheimer's. Okay? Rukshana. Right. And how do we do that? By that. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is Rukshana. Okay, so how do we do Rukshana? Now, we can't do Rukshana here where we apply a sand poultice to the person's head, right? So this is the situation where we need to do Rukshana internally. And it's not the direct Rukshana that we would think. One of the methods to dry out the excess moisture or to get rid of the ama in the situation is, of course, Amapachana. And Amapachana is, again, the same sort of methods that we looked at and how to digest ama. Okay? The same exact methods that we looked at in the previous one. So you need to do Amapachana. Okay? Another method of inducing dryness, now this is not dryness here specifically in the brain, but inducing dryness all over the body, then you can do it with Bardhana. Okay, so Udvartana is by using Kola Kulatari Churna. And I have the combination here. I can send this up. So this powder you may not necessarily get online, but you can easily make it because most of the ingredients are available. You do find them at the Indian store. You find some of them at Whole Foods. And there are only few ingredients such as Devadaru and Bacha. Bacha, you guys know. Of course, Calamus. And yes, I will send this out to you. This is the recipe of how to make this churna. So this is the ideal, the medicated powder that we use for doing Udvartana. Instead of just using chickpea flour, this tends to work better because it penetrates further into drying out excess moisture. Okay? So here also, the reason why we want to do it all over the body is because in drying that out, that induces or enhances the movement. Remember we talked about what happened in this is that it's not moving properly. So by drying it out, it'll start to move. The person may not feel happy immediately, but don't stop there. The purpose is to dry it out, condition the person so that you can go to the next step of therapy. Okay? So so this is how you do. You can do Amapachana, Udvartana. Dhanya Amla Dhara is the same like Shirodhara, but you use a different substance. And Dhanya Amla is actually a fermented rice water. Dhanya is rice. Amla is when it is fermented, it becomes sour. So we take, it's kind of like a rice wine in a way. And there's a recipe to make that. I can share that with you as well. So Dhanya Amla is basically you boil, we've made this before, you boil rice, okay? And you collect the water from the rice, and then that is placed in a clay pot and covered, and you seal it and you let it ferment. And it's a self-generated alcohol. It's really, really smelly. It's very smelly. But it is also, because it's fermented, it becomes a alcohol. It's very penetrating. So, and because once it is fermented, it creates or induces dryness. So this is one of our indirect methods. We don't do sand on their head, but we do Dhanya Amla Dhara that helps to dry out the excess moisture in the brain. Okay? So these are the methods of what we do for drying. So the medicines that you can give internally for this is Shadanga Kashaya, and I'll share that with you in a second. There are six ingredients for that, and those are also fairly easily available. It's one of the easiest kashayas to make. Okay, or you can do Shadharna Churna, that they will take this internally with kashaya, or they can take, if you want to give them just one at a time, they can take that with some warm water. So you give about I would say about a teaspoon with some warm water, probably twice a day. I'll write out the recipe in a second. Okay, so that's the first step. So we've now dried them out. And what do we do next? We oil them up. I'm sorry? Yeah, you don't usually want to go beyond 3 days because then it would be too much of drying. So about 2 to 3 days.
All of the internal and external?
Yeah. So that's like a very maximum drying. So what you can expect the outcome or the reaction to this, the person may start to feel some discomfort. They may start to feel gassy. They may start, now remember, this is aiming at treatment for Alzheimer's, okay? So it's already a fairly advanced condition. So you need to, if you're doing this with someone, you need to keep an eye on them and have a sort of a daily interaction or a check-in on what's going on. So I still wanted to put this out there if for those of you who have like clinic where you know, they can come in or the person lives nearby and they can come in every day, then you can keep an eye on them or go and visit them with like a house visits. If it's a very advanced condition and the person has come to you, then they're probably that relationship. Or if you have a very famous person who wants to be treated because they have Alzheimer's, then better. It does work for dementia as well. Because the pathogenesis and the approach to it is very similar in Ayurveda. We don't, like I said, we don't have a different name for these conditions. It all comes under, again, an issue with Vata and mind. Okay, so what this does, the benefits of this treatment, or why you do the Rukshana, is that it increases the lightness of the body. So the person will start to feel more light, maybe a little bit gassy, maybe a little bit loopy in that sense because it's too much. It's a lot of Vata that's moving now. The good thing is it's not stuck now. Now it's moving. The problem is it's still a lot that's still there. We haven't done anything with the Vata yet. All we've done is just remove the block so it can move. So as Veronica said this morning, it's not stuck anymore, but it's moving and I still feel uncomfortable. That's what they're going to feel like. So remember, and make sure and warn them about that. Otherwise, they're going to say, oh, I did this, I feel horrible, I don't think I can do the rest of this. So make sure and give them fair warning. This is what to expect. That's okay. We're going to take care of it. Okay? So it does induce lightness and also clearing of the shuddhas. Okay? And because it has cleared the shuddhas, it'll be easier to eliminate waste from the body. It may not induce elimination, but when you induce elimination, it will be easier for it to come out because now you're not trying to induce virechana where something is stuck. That's the reason why we don't do drying just here or just here. We're doing all over. So it's actually very similar to what you do in Panchakarma, is that you're trying to cleanse the shuddhas so that all the dosha can come back to the major channel so you can push it out. Okay? And what we're looking at here is just the aspect of chikitsa where we're looking at the body. There's still an aspect of chikitsa where we're going to be looking at the mind. Okay? In this type of chikitsa, there are three major headings. One is looking at the body and treating vata. The second is strengthening the mind, and that is sattva abhajaya and daivya vyapashraya chikitsa. All three we do in this condition. Okay? I will write that down. Okay. These should be familiar.
You pronounce them slowly.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yukti Vyapashraya. And that means that you use your yukti or your inference or your logic to understand what you need to do. This typically is when we look at the doshas or we're looking at the aspect of the body. Okay? Daivya Vyapashraya. Daivya. What is Daiva? Vyapashraya is when we look at the external. So, for instance, doing different types of rituals, looking at astrology, the planets, doing, this is where they use gems and like homa, they do different homas and rituals and offerings. All of these things come under Devya Yapashriya Chitsa. Okay? And the next one is Sattva Avajaya. Okay? And Sattva is another synonym for the mind. Avajaya means to conquer the mind. So that, what it translates as is that we are strengthening the mind. Okay? So in the treatment, so this is typically the description of all different types of treatment for all disorders. But we use all three of these. Not in all diseases, we don't usually use all three methods. But in this condition, we use actually all three methods. We need to strengthen the mind. We need to also take care of other factors, like for instance, if there's a planetary influence on this condition, or if they need to get rid of any issues of any past karma that may be influencing or pushing this to become more severe than it is. We need to take care of that factor as well. And of course, we need to take care of the factor of the body. So what we've been describing just now is actually under this one. Break time.
Is this a good?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna take a break for 15.
If it's getting too much,